boss is ready to talk.
But that's not, what, and what, that's not gonna be enough
Hi.
parking.
Ladies,
Oh,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
we're gonna get, no, no, you're fine. We're gonna get started.
good.
And you can do everything. I think we're gonna get started now, folks, if you wanna grab a seat. Thank you for coming tonight. This is a stakeholders meeting for the apartments in Melford Village. My name is Frank Stevens from the city planning staff. And I just want to orient you to the location of the subject property, which is outlined in the dashed area in this location. It's on the west side of Curie Drive, about 900 feet north of the Melford traffic circle. This is Melford Boulevard that comes in. Route 50 is down here, Route 3 is over here. The two existing office buildings are over here, and this is the larger stormwater management pond. There's an assisted living facility that's under construction in this location. The subject site and project is a 388 residential apartment building on about 6.5 acres. This site is about 6.5 acres. The property and the entire site are zoned MXT, mixed use transportation, which allows several types of uses, which include residential uses, retail, employment, and office uses. We have scheduled 2 public hearings for this case. The Bowie Advisory Planning Board meeting will be Tuesday, January 9th at 7 o'clock in this room. And the City Council meeting is Tuesday, January 16th at 8 o'clock in this room. This application is for a detailed site plan where we're going to look at architecture, building location, parking, landscaping, amenities, and things of that nature. This application cannot proceed to the county until the city grants its approval. Unlike most development review applications, the arrangement under this project is city approval comes first before the applicant can proceed to the county. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the representative of St. John Property, who are going to proceed with a PowerPoint show that describes in detail all the features of the project.
Thanks, Frank. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Antonetti, the law firm of Shipley & Horn, here on behalf of the applicant, St. John Properties. I'd like to introduce our team here tonight. St. John, we have Mr. Andrew Rao, Mr. Ken Finley, Jennifer Hearn, and we have partner St. John Somerset Construction, Mike Carruthers, here in the audience. On the design team, we have Representative Bowler Engineering, Mr. Christopher Rizzi. And last but not least, we have our architect, Mr. Peter Fillat, who will come up after me and go over a presentation of what this detailed site plan entails. Just basically to give some further context to what Mr. Stevens said, we're here tonight on a proposal for a detailed site plan for a residential component of the Melford mixed-use project. This portion of the mixed-use project was initially conceived back in 2013 through a covenant amendment with the City of Bowie. As Frank mentioned, the project is regulated by a series of covenants negotiated with the original developer of the project in the 1980s and with the City of Bowie. At the time the project was brought into the municipal boundaries in exchange for certain public concessions and certain controls over design. Over time, those covenants have been altered amongst the declarant, the city, and the beneficiary and burden parties of the covenants themselves. So in 2013, that was an important moment where the city essentially amended its policy with regards to Melford in terms of allowing it to transfer from just a single focused employment park to a mixed-use project, particularly on certain parcels within the project known at the time as Melford Village. That policy change set the stage for a conceptual site plan under the MXT zone to be filed by the applicant. In fact, it was an amendment of the original conceptual site plan for Melford to then reflect what the mix of uses would entail. both the covenant amendment and the CSP amendment, both approved by the City Council and ultimately by Prince George's County, allowed for up to 2,500 residential units and 260,000 square feet of office and 268,000 square feet of retail. In 2017, a preliminary plan of subdivision, which is the next step of development, which some of you folks may recall wasn't that long ago, when we came in and got this approved, but a subdivision plan was shown where we actually refined the mixed-use program to more align with the contours of the lands, the topographical constraints and other things to find out what actually could be truly yielded from the project based on its property and also based on certain market considerations. That preliminary plan of subdivision refined the mix of uses further within the Melford Village area, and it allowed for 1,793 residential units, down from 2,500 units, up to 124,500 square feet of commercial retail space, and 235,000 square feet of office uses. Within the residential mix and breakdown, there was allowed 293 attached residential units. That would include townhouses and a number of 2-over-2 stacked townhouses that would total 88 units. In aggregate, those attached units were 293 units, and for multifamily units, it would allow up to 1,500 multifamily units. One thing also to remember, when the city agreed to amend the covenants along with the master developer, St. John Properties, there was concessions made to how the residential units, what they would contain. And the city covenants required up to 20% of the overall residential use to be senior age-restricted housing. I will say, and Mr. Stevens pointed out, that there is an assisted living facility shown on the property. It's up to 140 beds or units. Those beds under the city covenant and the city itself, that counts towards provision of some senior living units. And if you were to do the math, that would allow for 700 residential units. In other words, 20% of 700 units would be equal to 140 assisted living units. And that's the paradigm we're working under. What we have tonight, again, and I'll just quickly go through a few slides. Here is the conceptual site plan that was approved back in 2015. Our property for what was known at that time as Melford Village is what's shown in the yellow boundary here. The property tonight that we're coming forward for a multifamily building is right here. It's a 25-acre site. Again, that was contemplated at the time. The colors don't really come out in the legend here, but that was contemplated as multifamily residential as part of the conceptual site plan. Further consistent with our previous approvals, here is our illustrative site plan that was approved by the city and the county recently in 2017, which shows a conceptual layout of how the buildings would lay out for the different mixed-use types, including residential, multifamily, the assisted living facility right here, and then the attached units, again, in the center of the Melford project. Again, the property we're looking at tonight, the detailed site plan is right here. It showed a multifamily building with structured parking. Moving on to that. Here is our actual technical black and white detailed site plan sheet, which is the plan once approved. We'll move forward to the county for filing. As Mr. Stevens mentioned, the covenants negotiated back in 2013 requires the applicant and the developer to come to the city first for approval of the detailed site plan. However, it also contemplates that approval not be unreasonably withheld, and that's in recognition that the policy for a mix of uses, including residential uses included in this plan, were contemplated by the parties back in 2013, again recommended in 2015 and 17 in the CSP and the preliminary plan applications, which were both approved by the county and the city separately. The last slide that I have is a rendered plan showing the building we're calling the Aspen. The Aspen is a 388 unit facility with structured parking. It allows for 587 structured parking spaces internal to the building. It parks at a rate of 1.5 spaces per unit, which marries up with the design guidelines approved in the conceptual site plan back in 2015 for the project. It does have multiple spaces. It does have prominence along the east-west boulevard. Mr. Falat will come up and he'll explain basically the design of the building, how the building represents and relates to the Melford House, and how it fits within the overall context of the master plan community, both approved through the covenant amendment, the conceptual site plan, and the preliminary plan of subdivision. Initially, that's what we have here. Again, the detailed site plan application is limited to the 4 corners of the application area, and that is 25 acres. This application does not talk about whether the use is permitted. That was handled by the covenants, the underlying zoning, the conceptual site plan, and preliminary plan. It focuses on how the building appears, how it relates to the prior approvals in terms of design elements, how it relates to the Melford House, and the public spaces, which Mr. Falat would point out and has some pretty good images. After Mr. Falat gives his presentation, again, this is a stakeholders meeting. There's no decision that comes out of this. It's an opportunity to have a discussion. I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions you may have, and we'll do our best to answer it as a team. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Falat, and you can go through the rest of the presentation.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight and interrupting your holiday season. Happy Hanukkah to some of you, or all of us, I guess. And we're really happy to have an opportunity to show you our project tonight. We've been working diligently on it for quite a few months now, and we're ready to sort of show you what we've got. And as Rob was saying, this is the site plan for the project. It shows the footprint of the building is in yellow. This is the parking garage in the middle of the site. One of the things that's, yes?
I see that there is the 582 parking spaces. I take it that's all enclosed in the parking structure?
Correct.
What about visitor parking?
So visitor parking, there's a drop-off right in front, okay, which is really just for drop-off, right? There's parking all along the street, starting here and going all along the street down to here. And then there's parking on the street starting here and going all the way down to there. So it's a fairly large building. So that really equals north of 100 spaces for visitors parking. Yes, sir.
What's the estimated height of the parking garage? How many stories is it going to be?
So the parking garage is completely buried within the building height. It's about 60 feet tall. And I have a lot of great images that will show you exactly how that feels. So this is just, I'm just going to orient you a little bit to the plan, and then we'll dive into some images. We have a lot of really nice images. You should really understand it by the time we're done. But I do want to say that this is East-West Boulevard here. And of course, for us, being involved with this project fresh and understanding the Melford House and the way it sits up on that hill, it's a beautiful old building. We're very pleased to be next to it. The relationship of that to the cemetery is really a great aspect of the master plan, and we really feel like we took that into consideration in our design. We created a courtyard on the south side of the building that does a couple things. It opens up to the Melford House. It allows these people inside here to be able to see it up on the hill, but it also creates a sense of privacy as well. So it's not like it's all open. There's a sort of a nice balance between the view, the nature of the privacy of this courtyard, and the sort of public approach to it. And you'll see that in the drawings. The plaza is a very exciting space. It is a space it's a gathering space for people. We have a lot of great images of that. And the front door to the building is right on axis with the plaza. That's the front door right there. There is a service entrance to the building. It happens here. And there's also the entry and exit to the parking garage. There's only one. And you may say, well, that seems ridiculous, but it's not. But these buildings function very well with one garage entrance. And the other, because people don't rush in and out of this building is a highly designed, efficient building. This is not the first one. This is called, they call this a Texas wrap or a Texas donut. It's a very well-designed building that has been worked on for probably over the past 10, 15 years, not only here, but also throughout the country. And so they're very, very efficient. It allows people who live in this building to park on the same level as the garage that they live in. So that you know, if you're living in this building on the 4th level over here, you drive in, you go up to the 4th level, you park somewhere around here, and you walk down the corridor, and you go right into your building. So it's really awesome. People love living in these buildings. And it's a great option in terms of residential for your community. The target for this community is really kind of a young professional group or an empty nester who doesn't want to climb stairs. And so you really have the convenience of driving to your front door and the other thing that's nice about it, it's completely undercover. So you're always out of the weather. And that's another, and for like what's going to happen probably tomorrow when we get snow, I don't know, jinx this, but it'll happen. And it's a nice way to sort of lifestyle. The other courtyard is the Zen, we call this the Zen garden. It's intended to be a calm space that is a pleasant view in. It connects through a little mews out to the pond. And you know, the pond, the little hill of the cemetery and the Melford House really make this development a special place. And we're really happy to be enhancing it with this project. There will be a lot of dog walkers in this community. A lot of these people like to have dogs. It's a dog-friendly building. There's actually, I'll show you in the plans, but this is like a little dog pen. So it's a place for safe enclosure of dogs, a dog run, but obviously people will be walking their dogs around this in really nice community. Okay, so let's see if we get this. No, who else can do that? Go forward. All right, so this is a plan that shows the overall footprint of the building. It's the ground floor plan. So what happens here is you can see the different colors are the different units. So this bright color is a studio. This sort of medium green is a 1-bedroom, and the lightest green is a 2-bedroom unit. If you'll notice, a lot of the corners of the building are 2-bedroom units. So the rooms have a room with each view, facing each facade, and then basically a living space at the corner. So these are really kind of spectacular units. And then also on the interior corner of the building, there are 2-bedroom units that have a really nice shared patio, so that the 1 bedroom opens to a patio, the living room is in the middle, and the other bedroom opens to a patio. And it's a really great little private ambiance that we create that overlooks, obviously, the courtyard or the other parts of the project. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to really try something here. So that was successful. This is the, I lost my dot. Okay. So we got a hand now. This is the entrance here. This is the lobby. And one of the things that's really nice about these projects is that when you enter the building, you look through a really nice community room and you see the sort of cabanas and the pool. So this building has a really nice natural flow in terms of the lifestyle. These people, most of the people who live here will come and hang out in this community room. If you want to visit what this building looks like and feels like, we just finished Annapolis Junction, which is right up the road off of Route 32. It's awesome. You should check it out. There's a beautiful pool. And you will actually be able to visualize and understand what this building is like, because I know it's hard for people to understand it looking at 2D and even in 3D representation. So that's how that flows. The leasing office will be to the right. There's a business center. There's a great fitness room that will also open out into this courtyard. There's a mail and wrapping station, so a lot of these it's like, if you were thinking, boy, what I would really like is a place for me to work and wrap my gifts and deal with all this stuff and not have it in my house. They invented this really fantastic, or we invented this really fantastic mail wrapping room, and it's just really fantastic, and you can see that at Annapolis Junction. There's a small theater that they can rent for events, or you can go and use it on a night, anytime, every night. There's basically a large projection TV screen, and then let's see here. There's a similar type space, I'm just going to say, at the north end of this building that is for the dog walking area. The rest of the building, as you can see, surrounds this parking garage. It's a single loaded core that runs around it, and units that face out all along the exterior of the building. And one of the things that when we're dealing with a very large building like this is we need to break it down in scale. And so we've really treated this building as a series of buildings, and you'll see that when we get into the elevation. But you can begin to get the feeling of that with the articulation of the plan. There's some ins and outs and some volumetric differences throughout the whole project. So the second floor of the, yes, sir.
I just had a question about when you construct it, what between the floors and the walls, sound propagation, silencing material, between apartments and
Yeah.
floors? Is there?
So what we do on these buildings is we actually have a double wall between every unit. So there's two 2x6 walls and an 1.5 inch air gap. And so that's I'm sorry, 2x4. Sorry, 2x4 in my plans.
How about
I'm sorry,
the air quality on these floors?
I didn't hear that.
Air,
Air qualities.
cars do have
So
exhaust systems.
yeah, so let me explain this. There's a 10-foot space between this the garage, and the building. But let me go back to finishing his question first. So the floor to floor, yeah. So the floor to floor is the same thing. There's a double layer of drywall at every ceiling, and there's a plywood, concrete, small, very thin concrete layer, and then there's a soundproof pad, and then the flooring. So it's a high STC rated. This building it's really, and another reason to go see Annapolis Junction, we use an over-design, the deflection on a typical building is L over 556. We're using an L over 72, and that is a really stiff floor. So even though it's wood construction, it feels like a concrete building, and it sounds like in other words, sound transmission is like a concrete building. So in regards to this space right here, you can see it all along here and all along here. That is a 10-foot wide air gap that runs from the lowest level of the garage to the sky. So it's open to the sky. And that's how the garage is exhausted. In addition, there is some mechanical exhaust, but not a lot. We don't need a lot of it. And again, there has never been an issue. Like I said, this is a well-engineered building. This is not we follow the rules and the codes that prevent those kind of things from happening. So there is never a complaint about exhaust, because really it's an open garage that's open to the sky on the two sides here. The other thing you can see in this building is there's two elevator cores, one here and one over here, and that's again for the convenience, so that when you park in this garage, you can go right directly to your unit or down into the Zen Garden or into the lobby complex. Any other questions about that?
Question about parking.
Yes.
Is it reserved parking for each unit?
No,
Number of spaces?
It's
or
not.
just park?
you park closest to your unit. There is, I'm going to speak for you if you don't mind, and if I'm wrong, then you can correct me. The developer is here, but I've heard this story so many, I know. So what happens is, if there's a person who has some kind of disability, they will make a convenience for that person. But it's a kind of something that they deal with directly, one-on-one, in a case-by-case basis. And then the rest of the people really kind of nest where they want to be. And you know, like, you wouldn't park on the floor above you if you didn't need to, so you don't. And the way the parking is distributed, it actually works out very well. But for people who have a special need, they will reserve a parking space. In addition, there is handicap reserved parking, but I'm talking about for the people who are not necessarily handicapped, but they have some other disability. They do make that. They're very accommodating, professional,
I was
first
just
class.
thinking in terms, you mentioned 1.5 spaces, I guess, per unit.
Right.
Is that how it works? And with millennials, they share. And so it could be 4 people in a 2-bedroom, I mean, I don't know. So did you factor in, you know, having multiple people, families live together?
Yeah, so the other thing about millennials is that they're more inclined to use car services. They're more inclined to use Uber. So you'll find that even in suburban areas, these guys don't have cars. You know,
Well, that's what I was concerned about, because we're not downtown. We're
Right.
kinda out
But even
in-
in the suburban area, it's the same sort of, it's the same thing that happens. Uber will go anywhere. There are Uber drivers surrounding us right now, and we're in a total suburban area. And that, they say, is a trend that's going to keep going. They say there's a trend toward driverless cars. I don't necessarily believe it, personally. I don't understand it, I'm scared of it, but that's what they say is happening. So the 1.5 is a current code, and we believe in the future that code's going to go down.
But also, and my concern too is that with families, you have, you know, the mother-in-law, the grandparents may live, or the kids may live with their parents.
Right.
And so that also brings more of a parking need.
Right.
You know, and, because most houses, if you look around here, you've got 5 and 6 cars.
I know, it's
in one
amazing.
house.
Yeah.
And so, I was just wondering if you all had considered.
It's a great point. I appreciate the comment. Don't mean to interrupt, but
Go ahead.
you know, with regards to this being offered for families, while we don't discriminate against, you know, any type of household, you know, by the nature of the room offerings, you know, we feel that this is going to, you know, mostly apply to young professionals and folks looking to downsize or looking for a lower maintenance scenario. There are no 3-bedroom offerings within this building, so I think that shrinks your pool of, you know, this being open to persons with, you know, large families, essentially. With regards to the parking scenario and the number of vehicles, this is part of an overall project and concept for Milford. As a mixed-use project, it's also contemplating bus service once the a mass transit bus service, once the rest of the project really comes online, because that's when LaMotta and other regional services look to place spaces. But our street configurations, our turning radius, they have anticipated future bus stops within this project. So there will be access to transportation. So for millennials or other folks who may not have a car, there will be access. But at least not forget, this mix of use is also meant to prop up the employment aspect and the retail aspect, which are developing within the project. So there is an opportunity for folks who want to work, shop, or meet some of their needs to actually walk to those conveniences within the overall project. So that's an element that's planned into this building and planned into the overall project. So
Now, are these apartments or condos? I'm sorry, I knew I was.
Apartments.
these will be this building will be rental, yes. So sorry, just wanted to add that.
I think we have another question.
Is this a public access garage or is it only for residents?
I think it's only for residents.
The building is a secured building. You need a key fob to get into the gate, to go into the park.
There will be a gated building, and it's a high-speed gate,
It's a
so.
totally secure building, all doors are locked at all times. So, and that's very important to us.
Okay, ready? All right, go go ahead.
Yeah, one more. I'm concerned about there being only, since we're talking about traffic and so on, I'm concerned about there being only one way into the community. there's just the one road into the Melford. There's no other exit. Now, I understand that it's intended to put another road, another access from 50 into the neighborhood. That's what I was told somewhere along the line. But there's no second exit.
You're correct. There isn't a second exit, ma'am. And through the overall planning, the countywide planning, at one point in the 1980s, the Master Plan of Transportation did look for a trumpet interchange, they call it, on the Route 50. And that's when Melford was originally designed for millions of square feet of office. It was meant to be a Crystal City light, that market never developed. So as the project transitioned to a mix of uses, the county, in its last update of its Master Plan of Transportation, which I think was 2009, they took the trumpet interchange out. So what you're left with is a single entrance. You're, to the point about whether that entrance exit is sufficient and adequate, this came up during the covenant, the policy discussion, the conceptual site plan, and it was ultimately tested at the preliminary plan of subdivision. And it was determined that given the width and the number of lanes coming in and out of the single entrance into Melford, that it could accommodate, in the event of an emergency, that traffic could be rerouted to the other lane or the other direction to allow folks in the event of an emergency such as that to have that as a sufficient access point. Also, as part of that proposal, there was a letter that was submitted by the chief of the county fire department, who also stated that based on their analysis and their standards, that this single access that exists at Melford would be more than adequate, based on the reasons that they could reroute traffic, as I pointed out, that it would be adequate in the event of an emergency to allow access in and out. So, that's the scenario we're in. That's the long-range plan. It's going to remain a single access, but we feel that it is adequate. It does meet, current fire response time standards, and the fire chief's letter supports that. So that's where we went with that direction.
I just really foresee some, once it fills in, the people move in and the businesses are operational, that the traffic backups getting in and out will be difficult. I mean, even in addition to potential, hazards.
Sure. Well, and traffic's a challenge in this network, particularly on 301, 197. It's a regional issue. It is a problem. Melford's been in the plans and development for decades, and it's part of our entitlement process moving forward with our different applications. It was demonstrated that while Melford has so many vehicle trips approved when it was all employment, in fact, the developer made significant road improvements to Maryland 3 and other contributions to mitigate those number of trips for those office uses. We've taken those trips and we've converted them to a mix of use. And so that same reality exists. While there's still a regional traffic issue, Melford, the developer, has contributed to road improvements that mitigate that impact. Is it perfect? No. It's still a challenging situation, but again, coupled with the opportunity for future mass transit with bus routes, the opportunity for the mix of use to actually work, where folks can work, live, shop, that those live there, that they could all take some trips off the road. Our traffic analysis at the time of our preliminary plan, which exists, showed that there's a greater balance actually coming in and out on the AM and PM hours with a mix of uses, as opposed to when it was all many million square feet of office proposed, where you basically had a vacuum pulling everybody in at the morning and then sucking everybody out at the PM rush hour. So
What
again,
year was that? Your preliminary plan?
our preliminary plan of subdivision, which is
What year was it?
this year, 2017. So anyway, so I didn't mean to dwell on while we're here just in the four corners of this plan, it is it's a valid concern, but just want to mention that we didn't ignore it, and that's how it was addressed in previous approvals.
And back here.
Oh, sorry.
So to piggyback off of what she was saying in regards to the parking, I would also try to advise that instead of going off of just the fire marshal and fire people in regards to the code and the flow of traffic and things, because we preside more for housing and repair and news for 2 years ago. But we have noticed with the little bit of traffic that's currently there, it's always happening. You have people who work in the buildings that fly through that roundabout like there's no concern. And then also the training building in the back, if you guys have ever actually went out when they're having training, and I don't know if all the residents have seen when all the cars are parked there. That alone is congestion in that roundabout.
Sure.
And that's even before we have all this good development that's coming. And like she said, that's congestion with just a little bit of traffic that we have now.
It's a fair point.
Not to add what you intend to add to.
So the intersections that aren't shown on the four corners of this plan are required to be studied, and we're doing what's called a signal warrant analysis. So at the current roundabout circle, in the future, and probably not too far away from this project coming online, that's going to be converted to a full signalized intersection. So the roundabout's going to come out. It's actually going to be a signal-controlled turning motions. So it's going to more evenly distribute and force people to stop. So it doesn't become the raceway, which this somewhat populated park has become. But there's just opportunities for people just to floor it and head to where they're going. So that's just one intersection that's going to be signalized. There's going to be another one signalized further down once it's warranted. So the traffic calming through those improvements and other improvements to the streetscape, which cause people to slow down, cars parked on the road, trees, narrowing of lanes, all those working in tandem, we think, and we've shown, at least in our previous applications, that that's going to create a more conducive, calm traffic scenario.
And I have one more question. So we moved from the Bucksville community to the city of Bloomfield. So my question now, I don't know if this is the right time, but when you purchase a home within the city of Bloomfield, is the city of Bloomfield not supposed to notify you that you're purchasing a property within the development of Bloomfield? Because we were never told that, which is the reason why we moved from Bucksville in the first place.
Well, the way the notification works for these applications is that you're supposed to post signs for the city process, and the signs are posted. I believe the city handles mailings as well for different steps, and that's when an application is being proposed. This has a long history, goes back decades, but with regards to future applications such as this detailed site plan, the applicant notifies all adjoining property owners. That's anybody touching the property, physically touching it, and sends mailings out. We also post signs, 16, 20, 19 signs for our last application all around the area. So we do everything we can to notify folks. Plus, we, through the city process, which is a great process for community input, we have a stakeholders meeting like we do tonight, the advisory planning board, city council, in addition to the local planning board, the local county council, and so on. So while we can't touch everybody and reach out to everybody, it's the regulations which set how you communicate, how you advertise these folks. So we meet the obligations for that. But does the message get out to everybody? Not necessarily, but we're glad you're here tonight, and certainly willing to answer any questions.
Mr. Antonelli, so we're saying like the original, this has been a project for what time? Project has been, is long ago, but the problem was when we as residents were given the opportunity to vote on development in that space, we were promised it would only be business oriented and maybe drive jobs forward and so forth. And you were saying, well, all the traffic comes and goes at one time. I'm glad, because one like me who works and has to run off errands on the weekends, I can imagine approximately at least 8,000 more vehicles sitting on 301 from Bel Air Drive down to BJ's when I already wait multiple lights, 15 to 20 minutes to go less than 2 miles. And you're going to add a project of this monstrous size. Those are cars that are there permanently. They're not just there coming in and leaving for the workspace. And I know that's all water under the bridge, but if you can have a gated community, why can't we at Bel Air, why can't we have a key fob and keep all this extra traffic from running into our side streets and into our neighborhoods, because it's going to funnel over there, and I don't think speed bumps is going to be the answer. And further, the traffic area where you're saying you have all the street parking is not going to be adequate for that building. You are going to have an excess of car. First of all, I've never seen like the 1.5 spaces. I've never seen half a car. But, you know, silliness aside, how many apartments units are available on floors 2, 3, 4? I mean, what we're looking at now is broken up by community room, but when you get to the next level, how many apartments are there?
Let's see.
It's too small for me to count. Do you not know?
It's on his plan.
Yeah, it's like,
Well, as he's looking at that, you know, with regards to the traffic and the scenario of the regional issues with the road network, again, we're not disagreeing that there's challenges on 301. Through the most recent application in 2017, the applicant is going to do further improvements to 301 in Harbor Way. It's going to add intersection improvements there, which is going to result in a longer green time, a green light time on the main line, which should help, won't eliminate, I'm not going to say that, but it should help with the flow of traffic. And the trips coming from here, you know, when we say the number of vehicles that may or may not come from this project, they're all not coming out at the same time. That mix is important. You know, that is a stark difference between a pure one-use office and a mix of uses. And you know, there will be a blend of people coming in and out. So, will it eliminate all traffic on 301? No, we can't promise that. But again, that's a regional issue. We've made improvements over the last decade to 301 in anticipation of millions of square feet of office, but that market hasn't materialized. So we're trying to energize the 1.5 million square feet that's out there with a mix of use, which is more in line with the most successful planned unit developments around the state. So it doesn't solve all the problems. I don't want to not recognize your concern. You know, we share. We want to have you know, a safe traffic situation for the future residents, tenants, and employees at the project. But we feel that this balances the best way we can the realities of their surrounding traffic network. And I know I've mentioned a lot on traffic. I jumped up and I shouldn't have. I do want Peter to be able to get through the slides, the elevations, and focus again on the 4 corners of this plan. I'm certainly willing to answer any questions, but if it makes sense, if Peter could just advance a bit more of the discussion, then we'll come back to questions. Is that fair enough? Okay, thank you.
To answer your question, on the lowest level, there are 50 units. On the second, third, and fourth levels, there's approximately 97. And on the top level, there's another 50 units. So plus or minus, that adds up to 300.
So like on floors 2 to 4, there's 97 apartments. How many parking spaces are there on those levels?
So there's, I'm sorry, I can't count those spaces, but there's approximately 100 spaces per level. So I'm going to move along and go all the way through this, and then we can ask a lot of questions afterwards. How's that? So the next drawing is the south elevation of the building. The building, as I mentioned to you, is articulated into a series of vertical townhouse-type structures. There are towers at the corners. There's sort of a series of vertical townhouse-like forms that march along one wing of the building. This is actually a view into the courtyard, and then this is another wing that sort of follows this wing. The key materials here are brick, and the brick that we're using is going to be similar to the color and texture of the Melford House. We're looking at using a metal standing seam roof over parts of the building, which is also something that the Melford House has, and the color will be similar. The balance of the building will be what we call cementitious siding. So it's like a clapboard style siding, but it's actually made of cement board. I'm sure you've heard of it. Hardy panel. It will paint it in different colors. This is the south elevation. The east elevation shows, this is really a difficult thing to understand, so I'm going to go quickly through these elevations so that we can get into the 3D representation and you'll really get a feel for it. This is actually the main entrance to the building. It's this There is a little canopy here. The building is sort of in its most residential character here. Again, you can see how the brick sort of steps up and down and up and down. And there is a big grade change between this wing of the building, the south side of the building, and the north side of the building. And in that grade change is where the service entrance is and the parking garage entry is. This is the north elevation. Again, the building steps into a smaller configuration here. This is looking into the courtyard is here. There's a wing here, there's a wing here, and then there's a corner tower in the project. And then this is the west elevation. This elevation faces the cemetery. And you can see how the building steps up the hill as it goes from 4 levels here to just a little bit of 5 levels here and then 4 levels at the end. The building kind of steps down as it goes up towards the Melford House. So this is these next series of images are really helpful in terms of seeing how the building relates to its context. This is, of course, the Melford House here. You can see the sort of red roof of the Melford House. And our building sort of takes the datum of the height of this roof and brings it across, and that's what that height is right there. And then it steps down and up and down and up again at each corner. So each corner is kind of a little recollection of the Melford House. As the building moves down the slope, it steps down. There's more interruptions in terms of the roofing, so the building has a kind of very highly articulated view. Again, this is the Melford House here, and the cemetery is here. So the building sets back and allows this really nice connection between the Melford House, the cemetery, and the pond.
What is the parking lot there for? On the left side.
So this parking lot here
Yes.
is for the retail. There's a retail development which is located to the west of the property. And so that's a little piece of the overflow parking.
It's not part of this plan, and it's really just a placeholder, but it hasn't been fully designed. It'll come back as a separate application. We'll have another stakeholders meeting in the future, but thank you.
So in all of these images, you can sort of catch glimpses of the parking garage. That's it right there. It's back in here. This is the entrance to the building. This is the drop-off. This is the plaza space. There'll be a lot of really nice images of that. This shows how the east-west boulevard has an opening into the courtyard. We've now zoomed around the other side of the building. This is the pond is over here. The then courtyard is in here. This is the dog run, and this shows the service entrance and the parking garage entrance here. And this is a good view. You can see down into the garage in this location. And then this is the northwest corner of the building. This is the pond in the foreground. The cemetery is here, and there's the Melford House there. So the sort of sight lines between the Melford House and the water and the cemetery are well preserved, and the project itself sort of is very articulated and creates a really nice human scale. We're going to go into a series of ground level views of the model. This is a SketchUp model, so it's actually built exactly off the plans, and it's built exactly off the topography. But the topography, which means the hillside, the slope of the hill, the computer does not smooth each of the topography. So there's not steps. It just designates how the hill kind of steps down. So it sort of visualize just the fact that there's a hill here, and ignore these sort of step-like looking things. It's not really like that. Okay. But it does show, again, how the Melford House sits above our project. It is on top of the hill. Our building is below the hill. Our building sort of steps down as it goes up to the Melford House. And we think it respects the Melford House very well. This next image here, this is an image, if you were standing behind the Melford House, that's the Melford House here. So if we're standing in the back garden of the Melford House, you would look down into our building. And as you can see, because we're up on the hill, the building is sort of nestles into the landscape. And then you can see also down into, that's the pool, back right down in there. And the plaza is over here. So we're kind of looking at this, looking down into the project. This is a very quick view of the entrance of the building. This is the corner of East West and Curry Drive. It shows the plaza, and I have a lot of much nicer drawings of that. This is coming up Curry Drive. Basically, the pond is sort of behind us and to the right. And this is along the facade that's looking at the pond. The Zen Garden entrance to the Zen Garden is right through here. Stepping away from the building here, you can begin to see, this is, again, we are sort of standing on the median of Curry Drive, looking south towards the project. This is the entrance to the Zen Garden here, and the pond is over here. And again, you see these steps. I know they're a little distracting and hard to understand, but just imagine that it's just a smooth slope. Here's a view of the building from across the pond, and you can see how it sets behind the hill. It doesn't disrupt the cemetery hill in any way. It's set away from it, and it respects it, we think, very well. Another image coming around the corner. And then this is an image showing how, from the entrance, the hill is really the feature. The cemetery hill is really the feature of the project. Our building is a backdrop to it, and it also does not doesn't block the view of the Melford House. These buildings here are that other development that you were asking about where the parking was. These will be retail buildings, and that's subject to another conversation. They're just a placeholder of gray block right now. So I want to talk about the exterior spaces, the amenity spaces for the project. Our landscape architect did some really beautiful drawings, and these are going to be probably easier for everyone to understand. This is an aerial view of the plaza. Kind of on market day, yes?
Sorry, can you speak up? I'm not hearing it.
I'm sorry. All right, I'm sorry. So it shows the plaza for the at the entrance to the building. This is Curry Drive, and this is East-West Street. You can see here we're starting to show some activation, like these could be market stalls on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning. And there will be a small fountain at the corner, very nice pedestrian space. The entrance to the project is here. This is the drop-off, and then there's parking along the streets. This is a closer view of that space. There we go. Got some volume happening now. It gives you a little bit better feel for the scale of it. Here we are at the ground level, and looking back at the residential building, you can sort of see how it creates a really nice public space. This is the entrance to the building. Now we've kind of moved back and close to the entrance of the building. There will be some really nice landscaping in front, trees and flowering trees and pots and a little overhead coverage for coming in and out of the building so you don't get rain. This again is just a pedestrian drop-off area. And then this is a little evening view of how the space could feel. We really think that will become the sort of town square of Melford, and we've paid a lot of attention to the way it's designed and landscaped with benches and opportunities for programming such as markets and music and other kinds of art events. So here's a series of images of the private spaces for the project. This is on the outside of the lobby space, the great room. You're looking into the pool space. Our properties are really beautifully landscaped. There's a lot of flowers, there's a lot of wonderful trees, and it's very well maintained. And so this is coming out of the front, right out of the lobby where you would see. And then this is an aerial view of the pool, showing the activity of it to the right. This is like a cabana type space where there's outdoor barbecue, and these spaces are really well used and create a great amenity for the, yes, sir?
Is there access from the public street into this area?
No, you have to go through the lobby to come to us. So that there's a fence. There's a fence line. You can't see it. This building is part of the fence, but there's a fence here and there's a fence there. And then code requires that we have a second fence around the pool. But there is a barrier, a fence, along this edge here. And on the other side, this is the cabana, that's the pool, restrooms. And then there's another fence between this building and that tower. The Zen space, this is a view of the space that connects the pond on the north into the Zen garden. And again, behind me is a fence and a gate. This one you can access out, but you have to have a key card access. And then this is a little aerial view of the Zen garden. And the thing that's nice about these buildings is because they are large, they create large courtyards. So the courtyards are really fantastic in terms of a sense of scale and creating their own sense of place. So they're big enough that you can grow really nice large trees. And you can create this park-like environment and still be in the complex of the project and in the security of it. I've got one slide more, and I'll make some questions. Now I'll answer your question.
I have many. So what was the tower for? In all these pictures, it's been like a really big tower in the back.
It's primarily for signage, so that people can see the project, they know that it's there.
So the lights.
It's lit, but it's not a strong light, and it's sort of similar to the Melford sign that's out there now.
It has a sign on it.
There's a sign on it that says Aspen, which is the name of the project.
Okay, and where does all the stormwater runoff go, especially from that view? The amphitheater.
Our civil engineer is here.
Shouldn't he be here?
He is here.
Oh,
I said he is here, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am. So to address your question, the stormwater is handled on this project in a combination of ways. As you know, there's some development that was done previously that is already existing and already being managed with the ponds that exist out there today. And then in addition, this new development also utilizes and implements additional stormwater design through what's called environmental site design, which is the most current stormwater regulations that the state requires us to do. So there are what's referred to as microbial retention areas in strategic places to serve each of the different drainage areas around the building. So they're kind of around the perimeter.
or what kind of rain events are we talking about?
So they're designed to handle 1 and 10-year storms per state requirements. That's the normal requirement that City Bowie as well as the state requires.
So how many will there be in those microsites?
Right now, I believe there's 4 specifically right around this building. And then there's others that spread out as you get further away from the building, because the drainage areas change, around the site. And those are actually, I don't know if you've ever seen a microbiome retention area, but they're like a landscaped area that holds a small amount of water for a short period of time, and then allows it to drain through a filter media in the bottom.
I didn't, all the sites you showed, I didn't see any of those ponds. Are they already set where they're going to be around the property, or are you guys?
You can point to that, Chris.
Oh. Yeah, so we're going through, there was a conceptual plan that was done initially with the project that located those. There is currently, as we get through this process, there will be a technical plan that will get approved that will specifically nail down the design to a more refined kind of level that will kind of address what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Sure.
So where does the water come from to serve this area? And how is wastewater handled?
So there are existing water and sewer lines in Curie Drive right now that we're able to tie into.
Water and sewer?
Correct. And then there are also proposed additional water and sewer lines in East-West Boulevard
So no wastewater will be handled on site, it'll all be taken to,
in a public system.
and is that built already?
Curie Drive is existing, yes.
What kind of impact is that going to have on the current system? Are taxes going to go up? Are we going to have to pay more to handle all of this new development?
No, well, actually, all the line extensions, public line extensions are paid for by the developer, so there's no public funding to extend those. In terms of where it goes to local wastewater treatment plants, which have more than adequate capacity. The county maps the entire county pursuant to state law to different numbered designations for the ability to connect to public water and sewer. This project's in category 3 for both water and sewer, so it's already designated to be treated entirely by public water and sewer systems. That was when it was millions of square feet of office, including now the mixed use. That designation still holds. So it will be a cost borne by the developer to extend those lines to feed to those.
Extending them from the city of Bowie's water lines?
No, this is WSSC.
WSSC, okay. It's all WSSC then?
That's
Not the city of Bowie
Not
water or
us.
anything?
Okay.
There was a conversion from the city at one point, from the city water to the WSSC systems based on the projected need for this project, even as an office project.
So none of the original Bowie 11 homes, not connecting to any of their lines at all, 0?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I can explain that. The sewage
Thank you.
is entirely separate from Bowie's water and sewer system. It's a WSSC system. The sewage gets pumped southward. The water is a WSSC. All the water mains and everything in Melford are owned and operated by WSSC. Oddly enough, the city actually sells water to WSSC for the Melford site, and it's actually a large pipe on Bel Air Drive. And many, many years ago, when this project was very young, it was envisioned that the city would actually serve both water and sewer to this project. And so, capacity analysis was done at that time. We've been sitting on the capacity for many, many years. We have plenty of capacity to support the entire, not just this project, but the entire Melford project. We don't have to build anything to do it. It's already all there. And it's
Right,
just,
it's going to use our infrastructure though, is what I'm hearing. I heard Bel Air Drive, so that infrastructure's already there.
it's all there. It's already all there.
Correct, so then the
But they
answer to
just
my question is
increased our
yes.
taxes to
Yeah,
maintain
that's the answer.
and upgrade the current system.
No, so
And-
because of the way that, again, all the
Well,
city is,
I'm sorry.
all the city is doing is, WSSC's lines are connected to the existing city line. So the city line is already maintained to support the community that it serves. So literally, this is in my mind, a little bit best of all worlds, because we actually don't own any of the responsibility for any of the piping. All we do is have a giant meter, and WSSC sends us a check, for the water that, what we do is we pull it out of the ground in the city wells, we store it, and that kind of thing. So that's where it occurs.
So you're using city facilities to do it. That's the source of the water that you're then giving to this development.
South.
But you're using the capital infrastructure of the city of Bowie to supply the water.
That's, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So yes is the answer to my question.
What the city,
So that's the answer,
the
yes.
city water system is supplying water.
So the water comes
That's it.
from the aquifers, or is it coming from the reservoir? Okay.
Now, this water here comes from the city's wells in the aquifers.
And the city's wells is tied to the aquifers
Correct.
that we
Yeah,
residents.
I should point out too that many years ago, before the mixed-use development was done, actually, the developer did contribute to some improvements for the city system because of the demand that was here. Over time, the demand in the city has actually diminished. And as I said, we've been sitting on the capacity for this project for many, many years. It's always been envisioned that they would use that.
But the demand it was diminished because of the energy-saving
Yeah.
equipment that we're using.
Absolutely.
So the city of Bowie jacked up the water bills, So, hey, let's just all be real here in this room, The answer to my question is yes, just to be clear.
As far as the city of Bowie's water ability to supply water and waste, okay, it may have taken into account possibly what's being built here. There's going to be a lot more built in Medford. No matter what we do, it's going to keep growing. What's the capacity at that point to be able to handle it without damaging our own water?
Yeah, so I don't want to distract from this presentation, but so we have a process whenever a development, like they were talked about there in Category 3 in the in the county zone, we have the same process. In the city, whenever a development is planned that wants to connect to city water or sewer, there is a process, a public process that says, hey, do we have the capacity, and what would it take to get them from an area that doesn't have public service to an area that does. And so we actually track that, and so that's how that's done, to make sure that we have the capacity. And if we don't, the city can either say, sorry, we can't support your development, or we would like to support your development, but you would need to fund the improvements needed to support it. So that's how it's carried out.
And might I add that when Melford was brought into the city, this wasn't part of the municipal boundaries of the city initially when it was originally zoned for this massive employment commercial center before this mixed-use proposal. As part of the annexation agreement into the city, as part of an enticement to bring the property in, said we'll agree to provide water and sewer through the city at the time, which is no longer the case. So that was a big part of the agreement to even bring Melford into the city, was to use it for, when it was 6 million square feet planned office, to have it served by city public water and sewer facilities. That's no longer the case primarily. With regards to taxes, Melford is in the city. They don't get a free ride. They're one of the largest, if not the largest, commercial taxpayer in the city. And that's only going to expand more the more it develops, because taxes are based on assessed value. And the more development you have, the higher the assessed value. So they are contributing not only to the county and WSSC fees, but also to the city tax base through this growth. So just wanted to point out that historically, where the water and sewer was contemplated. Ma'am?
Another topic is, how about the solid waste management? Where is all the trash pickup receptacles go on that side?
Well, specific to this building, Peter, I don't know if you could point out again where the trash services are. I believe that the service actually will either be the city of Bowie trash service, but I think for the multifamily building, I believe it's private service that will come and pick it up and take it to the appropriate waste disposal facilities. But it's a good opportunity to show within the building where those enclosed or out of sight trash areas for the building are. So, Peter.
So,
Are they open to the sky at all?
no, they're inside. They're indoors. The whole trash room, all of it is behind a garage door There's no exterior trash in this project. It's basically in a room below the theater, below this space right here.
Sam?
I have to say, this is lovely. You know, the design and everything, I think you all have done a great job, and you're following the government regulations and what have you. But my concern and what I've heard, I live over the Tulip Grove, just across the street here. And it's the traffic. I can't get past the number of people that are going to live in the units that you're going to include in Melford, along with the businesses, the traffic going in and out for the businesses. And it's like nobody is listening to that part of the argument. This is great, but a one-way in and one-way out onto 301, it just doesn't, the logic is not there. It just isn't. Especially, I don't know if you guys are here on the weekends, like she said. It's not just in the morning. It's not just in the evening. It is all day. And when you're looking at Law Chapel and the development further down 3, and not only that, the city of Bowie is also talking about development across the street over here in the Jesuit, that area. I know you all don't necessarily care about another development, but we do. We have to live in this environment. And then they're also talking about more development down 301 by the Walmart. So where is all this traffic going to go? That's the problem. Yeah. And so I get what you all are trying to do. I get the fact that the city of Bowie and Prince George's County is looking at more of a tax base because we have trim. But you're paying taxes, but you're using resources. And nobody is talking about increasing the lanes on 301. I talked to Doug Peters about maybe access onto Route 50. And you know what my response was? Oh, well, you know, that ship has sailed. You know, they've already put in their bids and what have you, and that was a part of some plan years ago. Well, I've been living over here about 10 years, and I know it's not your responsibility to communicate necessarily with all of the constituents, but there's a lot of development, or talk of developments going on.
Oh, we've heard it, and
And then the marketplace over here, you know.
Certainly.
Yeah, so it's more traffic. It's going to be more traffic going through our neighborhood. And it, you know, like I said, this is lovely, but the traffic issue just won't go away.
Yeah, I mean, again, the traffic, I don't mean to diminish it. There's a reality to the traffic. We point out how, the standards that we've applied to this application, not this application, but previous applications to justify the traffic impact. I mean, that's what, as the property owner and the government, that's what we have to go by. That's what the proposals are governed by. Again, Melford is differently situated than the marketplace or the Jesuit property mentioned, which are, you know, somewhat new, either newly conceived or in the infancy of their entitlement process. Melford's been around since the 80s, for millions of square feet. I hear what you're saying. I appreciate your opinion, but
just to go back a little bit in time, remember when the whole thing came on in '86, and when the real development started to move forward, probably in the '90s. What Rob talks about, this prescriptive test where you run the traffic numbers and the traffic engineers spit out these values of what you have to do. That was done years ago, and if you recall, and we've talked about this item over and over again for the past 4 or 5 years in these types of discussions. What you got to remember was when they did that test and they said this 3 million square foot office complex is going to generate this amount of cars. Well, back in the day, we paid millions of dollars for the improvements, the physical improvements up at 450 and Route 3. So there were dollars, millions of dollars put up there and other spots around, and it's in the millions, all right? So what they said was, when they spit out that traffic number back then, they said, okay, you've now created a bucket of trips, let's call them credits or chits, for lack of a better word. You make these improvements, spend the millions of dollars, and you've captured those trips. So at the time, and I know this isn't how reality works, if we back in 1991 had suddenly paid for those trips, calculated them out, put the improvements in, and just dropped the 3 million square feet in, we would have balanced out and we would have covered what we did. As you all know, it didn't work out that way. But what it doesn't, what we're missing maybe a little bit is those trips and those improvements that we made, the money that was spent, the millions of dollars, we still sort of have that chip. So now time is sped up, but we already paid for and made those improvements that were done back in the day. So now we're basically reaching up onto the shelf and taking down the improvements that we banked years ago and saying, okay, here are these chits, and now we're using them. It's just that the unfortunate part is things didn't happen as fast. So we did the improvements and front-loaded them. Now we're catching up to what we do. If you fast forward in time, the new developments, such as Jesuit, for example, whether it goes or doesn't, I don't know. I mean, I follow the news like you do, but they're going to go through the same test. So you remember I said they'll do the APF test? We're going to say, what does that thing produce? They're going to do what that thing produces. It's going to generate the traffic studies, and they're going to say, if you want to move forward with this, you have this bucket of things you have to do, and there's going to be a value to that. If you do these things, you're going to create whatever that is, widening on 450 or whatever, it doesn't matter. If they pay that money, do those things, they've now banked those trips. And that satisfies, that's what the APF is all about. And all I'm trying to say is we did that years ago, but now we're kind of catching up with what we paid for.
And I understand, and of course you're gonna wanna recoup your investment, you're visiting people, that's what you should do.
Right.
But the problem with traffic is, it may be, they need to go back and look at the algorithm or whatever the case may be, but things don't always work out the way you expect them to. And especially, who knows, back in 1991, did they expect that One Chapel was gonna be down there and that we were gonna have as much traffic as we have at this point? So there's one point, you know, and I don't know how to say it, of course you should use the chip, you know, but how does that, how does it equate to,
I know, but I
where
guess what I'm trying to say is that's the law, and so they said, okay, here's the prescriptive, it's all prescriptive, there's no magic in it. You got to do this, and you've done it. Now, one thing Rob did touch on briefly was the 2,500, the original approval for the 2,500 units. What happened was, when you had the first 1.5 million square feet that was developed, in by right, that's also a very important thing, and we litigated this over the past 4 or 5 years. But if you went back in time to 13 when we were doing this, and we changed the covenants, what we kept talking about is we said, if you take the traffic for the fully stabilized 3 million square feet of office, that thing, whatever that thing is, that equals this box of trips. We then said, okay, now there's basically 1.5's up and 1.5 isn't. That 1.5 that isn't, calculate that back and tell us what that equals in residential units. Guess what? 2,500 units. That's where the number comes from. So when you look at what was by right traffic, and I think Rob touched on it, he said, if we went ahead and built the 3 million square feet of office space, which we could do by right, we wouldn't even be in a room like this, but Crystal City never materialized, you would have the same amount of trips. The difference is, because people coming to work in the morning and people leaving in the afternoon, the total aggregate of the trips is roughly the same, but the peaks and the valleys are completely spiked. So in the morning, you have everyone coming in, and it's going to be crazy, and in the afternoon, everyone coming out. But because we've changed it around, the overall volume stays static, but the trip peak is now flattened out because they're not all coming in and going at the same time. So actually, if you want to be completely technical about it, the actual impact of traffic has been lessened, even though the overall volume is the same. Does that make any sense?
Well, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't feel like reality. I mean, on
It's the
paper
math.
and theory, and then another part of the issue is that I see, I was in program management and what have you, we always have to come up with a risk management plan, contingencies, if things don't work out the way you think that they should. So we're hearing quite a bit in terms of the government doesn't know everything. So we're looking for private industry to come in and tell us and, you know, what we should do, and they've got the theory and what have you. But then we also know that in private development, things don't work out the way you think that they should too. So what do we get as homeowners and the constituents in Prince George's and County and Bowie if this does not work out the way you think in terms of traffic?
True.
It is so much that we can't
Well,
move.
one other thing is the essential owner of the office component right now is St. John Properties, all right? We own most of that stuff. This gentleman here, he's putting up cold hard cash to build that thing. So we're not going anywhere. So if we sit there and create a complete nightmare for ourselves, what we're going to do commercially, I would assume, is shoot ourselves in the face. So we've also looked at it carefully and said, okay, could we maybe have upzoned it to 5,000 units on the 90 acres? I don't know, probably technically we could. If you follow the best practices of this whole mixed-use walkable community, if you look at other suburban areas, whether you take Bethesda or whatever, I know we're not Bethesda, but those guys go the opposite route. They're trying to fit more stuff into a smaller space and get more of the mixed-use stuff. So we said, okay, we looked at the scale, 90 acres, 2,500 units. The whole point is to create a walkable spot where now you at least have the chance, speaking about traffic, you have 1.5 million square feet of office people there. They can't live there, right? They can move into one of the new hotel rooms, I suppose. But by what we're doing, whether you capture 1 or you capture 100 or 1,000, at least you've now given the people the opportunity where they can come out of this new facility that we're developing here in the apartment building, and now they can at least have the chance to go down a little street, a retail street that'll be coming soon, and get a bite to eat. They don't have to jump in the car and go somewhere. Could they be lucky enough to work in the same community they live? I think they might. With the millennials especially, and I'm on the National TOD Council for Urban Land Institute, the same with the Neighborhood Development Committee. We have two yearly meetings talking about this stuff. Peter's right. The way it's going, especially in the TOD bit, is I think you're going to see what other communities are doing is the parking ratio is going to get driven the other direction where people are now starting to use Uber. I never used Uber 3 years ago. Now I kind of like it. So we can all say what we think. No one knows the future. But if you start looking at the trends, the data, and the data is what it is, you're going to start to see that these communities are going to get more dense, less traffic, younger people, less cars. You're going to try to congregate there. That's the whole point of what we're trying to achieve.
So in terms of the building design, I would just like to add one of the things that Mike likes to remind us, and that is that this mailroom, package room is not amateur, okay? It's gigantic because people who live in these communities get so many deliveries. Why? Because it's a pain in the you-know-what to drive to BJ's and buy. They'd rather sit in their home, let their package come to them, and so they actually have a full-time person who accepts packages for these people. And you can say, oh, it's not going to happen. Actually, it's happening now.
Oh, no.
So, and it's going to keep
I
happening.
got a part-time job at UPS.
So there you have it.
Okay, so I see what they do. So I got it.
So with drone delivery and all the rest of it, that's intended to take cars off the road. So I'm not saying that it's definitely going to happen, but it's another venue for what could happen as opposed to more of the same that's happening now. And the building is designed to receive that volume of goods coming from not more trips.
Ma'am, you have a question?
Yeah, questions, a couple comments. I just felt like the presentation is kind of repetitive. It's like you're trying to sell it to us. And it's like, I'm not interested in the details or specifics since I don't want to move there. I kind of want to get out of the city of Bowie altogether because of this whole project. And the amenities that you've explained, they don't provide suggestions to make this transition easier for those of us that already live here in the surrounding neighborhoods who have to battle the extra traffic and congestion that this will generate. So you're adding to the volume of the traffic, and the improvements on 450 that you had just mentioned, and you kind of said it yourself, they don't apply to this now. They were dated, it was a long time ago, it's different now. The whole city's built up completely differently, and adding to this, those don't cover for what this is going to do. So I think the biggest thing is going back to traffic, which it's probably a moot point, but what are the plans for safety and traffic, reducing traffic, those measures? And then you
bring up Uber again. Okay, if you're relying on people using Uber drivers, that's still traffic coming in and out of that area. Whether they're parked and live and use that garage, or they're coming and going, Uber's still traffic and that's still cars. And that doesn't solve the problem. And then you mentioned buses. So I really want to know, are the buses just for that community? Are the buses going to bring people out of that community? Or if that's even a possibility. So you're adding in Uber cars, probably buses. And then why would you need buses if you're saying this is a walkable community to walk and live in the same area and possibly work in that same area? Because you're going to have people that not only live there, you're going to have the retail, people that work there, and employees, and restaurants, and everything else you want to build up. That's 24/7 traffic. That's not just morning and night. I know you're saying it's going to level out, but that's constant.
Yeah.
Whether it's Uber or residents, whatever it is, it's going to be constant. And with that volume, it's not going to go away. And then it's kind of ironic to me that you bring up the trees. You're talking about all these trees and these courtyards. You're tearing down trees to build this, to try to throw more trees in there. And I think the environmental impact of this whole project is very disappointing too. And I don't feel it's a concern for any of you because you see more and more wildlife killed on the road because there's so much traffic. You're pushing them out, and then you want to put a few more trees in. You're clearing out the trees that are there. So it's just, overall, this is just, I don't understand the structure.
I think that the traffic issue is a really serious matter for everybody in Bowie. And it certainly is a great concern to me. At the same time, I do want to say that I believe that a lot of what you're doing here in presenting this is showing us that this is going to be built. It's not, it hasn't had final approval yet, as I understand it, but if it gets built, you're showing us that it will be a really nice development, that you're not putting some schlock in there that would be a detriment to the community. I think that's a lot of the point of your presentation.
Well, man, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the comments. If I just for a second, I know I can understand your feelings. Certainly, the intent is not to create something that would not be compatible with Melford, would not be compatible with the city of Bowie. Traffic generation is a real element. There is a regional scenario where traffic is difficult in the area. But this project is zoned for development. It's been zoned for decades for development. Traffic could be created, but it was the principle, the organizing principle for this project overall was compact, sustainable development. Tight, walkable blocks and streets where it gives people the opportunity to be able to work where they live, take some vehicle trips off the road. We didn't account for that in terms of our traffic studies. Our traffic studies assumed worst case scenarios. In fact, our traffic study assumes 2,500 residential units in addition to the thousands of square foot of additional commercial space. What we've done now through the further entitlements is pared it down to 1,793 units, which is a lower number, less trips generated. We don't know what the future will bring. This is a long-term project in terms of traffic development. It'll be 10, 15, 20 years, depending on how the market absorbs these units. So it's not going to be overnight, but we have developed it to respect the project overall. It's supposed to fit within the developed Melford. You mentioned the environment. There's adequate stormwater management facilities that are deemed as amenities, including the pond right now with the walk around it. We've dedicated 100 acres to the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission of the 100-year floodplain sensitive tree area to create a natural buffer, but again, to preserve as many trees outside of the developable area that's been designated for decades. That was done out of respect for the environment. Are some trees going to be cleared as the developable designation of this property is developed? Yes. Other trees will be planted. It won't be a one-for-one scenario, but by having a compact footprint with a multi-story building, we reduce the opportunity to spread out over many, many acres. Structured parking reduces the surface parking lot. Instead of having 587 spaces spread out over acres of land, it's in a compact, dense area. That in and of itself is a sustainable design practice. So, is it the same as virgin land? No. But has it been carefully designed and thinking of sustainable elements? Yes. And we're happy to bring this forward. We think it represents the vision of the Melford Village design guidelines, and we're excited about bringing it forward. And we hope once it's online that you folks here will see, how it is a good addition to the city overall.
What about the buses that you had mentioned that?
Sure.
Are they gonna be just like taking people
No,
from the
no.
store to their?
It would be Metro. It would essentially be Metro, but a bus is, when many people are on a bus, they're not individuals in a car coming in and out, so,
If the buses are gonna come onto like my residential street, you know what I mean? Like, are they gonna come out to the neighborhoods?
I'm sorry, no, it's
Or
not,
is it just in this?
we're just in this I'm sorry.
Okay,
I thought it was going to be a circulation just
Yeah,
in the
I didn't know if
project.
it was
No.
that, like just to that complex, to the whole Milford area, or if they come out and take people elsewhere out of there?
Well, I won't control the Wilmota route, but it would take advantage of current buses running, and then they would, on whatever current route is, they would come into Melford as part of their route, and then continue on their way. So that's the intent, and that will come later when the development reaches a greater saturation. Yes, sir.
When you had a commercial development, people that were working in the units or in the areas there, they would come out and they would go Route 3, one way or the other, or 50. Problem is, when it's residential, people are going to go through town, they're going to go through the city streets, and there was not a traffic study that adequately measured and determined if the city streets could handle it. And we residents know that the city streets cannot handle that traffic, and that's the issue. I mean, that's it, more than anything else. By the way, I think it's an attractive building too, by the way.
I appreciate
Very, very
that.
nice. I appreciate that, but, it's just, the traffic is, it defies common sense. It just defies common sense.
And as a development side, we've heard this, and we had a I think you were at the stakeholders meeting recently.
I've mentioned it before.
Right.
Several times, I think.
And they're legitimate points, and we're doing our best to address them. There's a condition regarding traffic calming devices, which, there was a presentation, there was feedback to that. There's going to be a newer proposal when the city approves it, reflecting the comments that were made that night. That'll be forthcoming in the future, but we haven't turned a blind eye to it, and we are going to contribute to some calming measure that hopefully will be more acceptable to the residents and be effective. That's our goal. Ma'am, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
Where do you live?
I live in Montgomery County.
Okay, so you don't drive these streets every day?
Not every day, but
You're not on display?
I work in Prince George's. I grew up in Prince George's. My first home was in Bowie.
So I'm assuming that was like 30, 40 years ago, that you lived and grew up here.
10 years ago, I'm not
But you left Bowie and it's different than the 10 years that you've lived here.
I didn't leave for reasons of traffic. In fact, I still work in the county. I wish I still lived in Bowie because I drive way too much to get to my job. But my wife is from up there, and she's her mother and the children. It's a different scenario. But that's my personal reasons.
So where are the rent prices of these going to be if they're geared toward millennials, which are here? What are the rent prices of these places?
Mike, might you want to answer some of that? Give some idea.
I don't know that we've really locked it down yet, but I would suggest that a one-bedroom, $1,500, $1,600.
That's insane.
Pardon me?
That's insane.
Are you going to have businesses in this community that can support that kind of salary wage?
Yeah.
We've built many of these around the area, and we get that
Well,
every
no,
day.
now the question is, this is supposed to be a self-contained community, so the businesses that you plan for this site, are they going to support people that have to pay that kind of rent?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be market
I will
driven.
tell you,
Give me an example of the kind of businesses you plan to put in here that can support that.
Well, it's not, before I answer that, it's not just the residents here. They're a component to a mixed use. Somebody mentioned 24-hour environment. That's actually one of the purposes of the MXT zone, is to create a 24-hour environment. There's 1.5 million square feet of office right now where there's no amenities, restaurant amenities, personal need, convenience amenities, where folks have to go for lunch. If they leave, they have to go out onto the roads, leave. So some of the future businesses are going to be, restaurant pad sites. There also could be
Salaries that support that, so.
the salaries to support what?
Salaries to support that kind of rent.
sir, I will tell you, we've done studies for the area. Those rents are already being generated in the Bowie area with the existing projects.
Well, no, that's not
But he's
necessarily.
talking about the salaries of the personnel that will be working in the restaurants. The waitresses, the people behind the counter, they're probably gonna be making
Well,
generally.
we do have, as part of the city longer-term planning for housing offerings, there's an affordable dwelling unit program that that the city is just actually a leader in terms of requiring that in developments. This project has a 5% affordable dwelling unit requirement to offer that within the project itself for those types of income levels. So, and the city should be commended for that. The county hasn't even adopted that. They've talked about it.
Right, but I think it goes back to the point that you were saying that this is gonna kind of be a contained community where folks can live and work at the same place.
That's right.
The majority of the people are not going to be working in the restaurants because they're not going to be.
Well, the majority of folks
and
would be working.
millennials share. So there are going to be, again, multiple people living in the units who might have cars, which is going to add to the space. So it's kind of a circular type.
It's a mixed bag, but
Yeah.
again, the jobs. I mean, there's employment. Not the restaurants that don't exist. The main driver of employment, make no mistake about it, is the 1.5 million square feet that's developed or approved, that's already built or to be built around the center of this project. That's where we feel the majority of jobs, the folks who will live and work and shop in there. That's where those jobs will come. So yes, will there be other jobs to support the restaurants? Yes, but that won't be near the vast majority of jobs. It should be the 1.5 million of existing or developing office uses that are around this project
And
right
when
now.
do you anticipate those offices will be built?
Most of them are built right now.
But I thought that a lot of them, the office space, you see the signs up there always looking
I know.
for renters or leases.
Yeah, we desperately want to transition this product. The problem is it's been performing suboptimally is the approved term. The blended rental rate, occupancy rate is in the 70%. That's dismal for projects that are commercially offered, that are privately financed. That is not a good stabilized rental rate. It should be in the 90% or so. I mean, because St. John Properties is so well funded internally as a company, they're able to withstand that. They're able to build buildings speculatively, hoping to lease them up. The 2 large office buildings are an example of that. That was built before they were leased. They're still struggling to lease those buildings fully. When you inject this mix of uses, I know I'm getting off the 4 corners of this plan, but the overall principles are you bring in these other users, these other elements, and it becomes a more vibrant place and more attractive places to employers particularly, because now they have places for their employees to live, they have places for their employees to shop, eat, so they don't have to run off the site. It's a place where they want to locate. So we're hoping that, and we believe it's actually already starting to happen, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, the evening's a little bit of deja vu all over again. If you start, we've had, I think Rob and I were calculating that, we're probably to maybe the 10th public hearing, maybe 11 so far since 2011 going all the way up. Some of these elements that keep repeating themselves are traffic. And you know what, when we come up with the next DSP, I imagine we'll be talking about traffic. So if we just table that one for 1 second, the next thing we're talking about is you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Some of the initial opposition that we had back in 13 and 10 when we were making the actual conversion from the office over to res was, oh, you're going to bring in apartments, it's going to be awful type of stuff, and blah, 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 blah. So we go the route of putting in these high-end, beautiful things. And I'm not going to say it's a resort, but when you take Peter's offer up and you go look at Annapolis Junction, it kind of looks like a W hotel, if you ask me. It really, really nice. So if you booked yourself a trip somewhere and you ended up in that, and that was, and you walked in, you'd be darn happy to stay there. Just trust me on that, and take up his thing. But then the other point is, so they go to the market that says they want to do this. If you go back and look at the video of 2013, especially in front of the EDC commission, we did one night where we ran all the commissions together. We had a Honorban Vasu, I don't know if you've ever heard of The Economist. Now, Honorban came in and gave basically a market study of why he thought the repositioning of Melford as a total deal, which was basically, he was saying, you've got to reposition the project because it's in trouble, like the commercial that was failing. So he wanted to re-energize it or reinvigorate, reinvent it. and that spark was the residential. So Honorbon gave his presentation on that. What you also was done was Stephen Fuller, Dr. Fuller at George Mason University. He gave a more academic reasoning of arguing the same point. So now if you kind of fast forward, here we are, we're creating the unit that alleviates the problem that you're creating, this sort of blight, of apartment blight. Mike comes in and says what the value of the units are, and they're nice because they are really nice. And everyone's saying, well, they're too expensive. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. We put the chip and we put the bet on the fact that they've done, how many of these things have you done?
About 5,000.
And these are, he's putting his money where his mouth is. They're doing them over and over again. The market will yield this. It seems like a lot, but you're in a metropolitan area of 5 million people, don't forget. So what we're talking about tonight, just two specifics, the traffic and this part about, what is this the right thing for the market? All I can say is we've been discussing it since 13. We really have, and you can go look at that stuff. The one thing that always hits me, and I've explained it to my wife, she doesn't understand this in a way. When you look at the property and you see a green field, all right, so you see that undeveloped property, it's green when you're looking at it, but it's been legally papered as a development. It's not a green field anymore. It hasn't been a green field for how long ago?
Since 30 plus years.
30 years ago, that was not a green field. So although you sit and you stare at it and you see a couple trees and grass and all that, legally and programmatically wise with the county and through all those legal processes, that thing was developed in 1986. It's just that now 1986 has actually come. So if we had developed in 1987, you'd be staring at another 3 million square feet of office. So I think it's a misnomer when you look at it as a greenfield. It hasn't been a greenfield since '86. In reality, when you look at it on the dirt, it looks like one, but it's been developed and it was developed on paper in 1986. Now it's caught up with it. It's not like we went out and secured a wooded site in 2017 and said, let's go through the same process and plan it out. That would be what was done back in '86. So it's not a greenfield. And Rob said that was a 400-acre parcel. The piece on the side that's over here, as he mentioned, this is 100 acres of it. 1/4 of what we bought, we dedicated to the county and deed restricted, can't be developed. So if you want to look at it as a tax, we paid a 25% tax on what we bought. And we said, okay, county, take these trees, take them in the floodplain, we're not going to touch it. We kept 75, you get 25. When you say trees, we gave a quarter of what we owned away. So if any of you had the same thing that Holmes said, we'll give us a quarter of what you got, we did that years ago.
Ma'am, take that question.
Yeah, so the traffic is a big concern, but also it's the impact on the quality of life of the people that already live here. Now, many of us moved here, bought here years ago for the peace of quiet, cleaner air, darker sky, safety, quiet. So I'm concerned about the light pollution. You had mentioned, you envisioned like concerts, things going on in the amphitheater. We're already having to put up with the Louis Bay Sox field and Lights of Columbus and not much of the noise on 301. I'm concerned about the impacts to my quality of life that this will have. And that's one question. Another one, are you required to do any kind of surveys for endangered and threatened species?
Yes. Yes.
Such as the northern long-eared bat?
We rare, threatened, and endangered species is a analysis point done through the technical plans that were associated with some of the early entitlements for the entire project.
And you go through probably IPAC to do that, and that draws from county records, whether lot they were, but have you had any ground studies conducted?
We have analyzed that. We've gone through the Department of Natural Resources, and they provided the letter. They updated the letter as part of the 2017 submission of there are no rare, threatened, or endangered species in the pockets that are being slated for development now. Those more sensitive areas are within the 100 acres that were dedicated, which again is the added benefit of having that buffer. But yes, we looked at that and study.
Well, so that's that. But what about the impacts to being sensitive to other communities that are in the area and want this peace and quiet and don't necessarily want to have all the lights and the parties and the loud.
Well, certainly as a facility, again, on the four corners of this application, which again, doesn't look at the traffic, doesn't look at the larger public facility impacts. That was an earlier application. But this particular facility is a secured facility. It's a managed, maintained facility. Mike runs properties throughout the area, and how it looks is representation on the ownership. If it's gone to heck in the handbasket, it's going to impact rents. It's going to impact the reputation of the facility. It's in the interest of the ownership to keep it fresh, painted, landscaped, manicured, as an appropriate amenity. This building will be no different than any other building that Somerset Construction works in.
What's the point? I would like it to be different.
Well, different in the sense of a maintenance.
We don't need more chem lawns, and we don't need more manicure, and we don't need more lights. And let's make this somewhat low impact, kind of low on the landscape.
And low impact means different things. And again, that is a multi-story building on a tight footprint with structured parking. That is a low impact development technique. It is an impact in the sense that it's something that's there that wasn't. But it is designed sustainably. The lighting situation, there's not going to be excess uplighting. It's going to employ full cutoff optics. That means it's going to be downlit. It's not going to advance the light pollution. That's, say, a Baysock Stadium with overhead mercury lights shining up. That's not how it's designed. So as a livable community, a mixed-use community, that's what we want too as a master developer. So we're sensitive to that, and this building is in line with county standards and those types of standards as well. Sir?
What about the noise pollution?
Not necessarily that. So just take into consideration, I'm not as lucky as some of you all that may live in the Bel Air area. I literally live in Melbourne, and I can walk, it's a 10-minute walk from where I reside to the lake. Take into consideration that where I live now and Crossing Waysway is 6 miles up the street, you can hear that driving that 6 miles away. So once you guys put all this other stuff, right there, like she said, with the noises, that's going to be right in our backyard.
Well, you say the noise from Route 3, I'm sorry.
Racetrack, which is 6 miles up from Compton, in the Melbourne community.
Well, Melford, both interior and exterior development will meet all noises measured. Ambient noise is measured by dBA, it's the unit of measurement. This will meet all outdoor noise quality standards. It's buffered far enough from the roadways that it won't be impacted in an inconsequential way by road traffic from the interior. All the units will meet all dBA interior noise standards. In terms of the noise generator itself, this particular it's a residential unit. There aren't an enormous number of balconies. Those are left to the interior courtyard. The opportunity for outdoor noise pollution added by this building are minimal at best. So that's not the intent of the program here. We don't think noise pollution is going to be an issue with this particular project.
We're more concerned with that than you are. We have to lease this thing over and over again. One of the reasons why Somerset is partnered with St. John is we have the same philosophy we own forever. We don't build and sell, stabilize and sell, and make a couple bucks and get out of Dodge. And in a quality, an A-type property like this, the turnover is generally, because you are dealing with millennials who change jobs and whatnot, is about 50% a year. And it's very important for us to maintain the integrity of this property year after year after year, because I have a property in Alexandria we've owned for 40 years. And I'm not going to tell you it's as nice as the day it was, but I can tell you it's nicer than anything else around it. That's for sure. That's what we do. We maintain our properties. That's how we keep our rents up.
Are you still planning to build a walkway from that development over to Bel Air?
Yes.
Can you scratch that and not put that in?
No, it's a requirement of it's a conditioned requirement.
We didn't do it because we wanted to, we did it because we were made to.
Why do you have to do that?
It's part of the outward orientation as a purpose of the zone and the purpose of the plan that approved that condition. It requires you to find as many ways to have connections with the surrounding communities. Now, that may be opposite to some of the things we've heard tonight, but that's a reality. That's a requirement of the zone that this property is in. Yes, we've designed it. We actually have plans in with the State Highway Administration. It's being designed. It's going to involve some changes to the off-ramp, some signalization to allow safe crossing, to allow folks, if they want to utilize it, to allow people to come in and as a pedestrian and utilize some of the future amenities of this mixed use at Melford. So it's there.
I don't want to be connected to that, and I don't want them connected to be able to come into my neighborhood, steal something and run back across the little bridge. And no matter how nice this is, and he's talking about the upkeep, I will never support it because I really don't think it's safe with the one entrance in and out. If you have a fuel spill that encompasses both lanes, if somebody in that apartment has a heart attack and they can't get to the hospital in time, you've killed
Some
somebody.
traffic calming measures to block the roads up even more. How is emergency personnel supposed to get back there?
We haven't proposed traffic calming to block emergency vehicles. I appreciate your opinion. The facts and science and the studies behind it show that it will operate adequately. I appreciate your comment, but that's
I will
not how we
never
see it.
recommend families staying in hotels. I will never recommend anybody buy there. There are plenty of apartments with openings that are advertised all the time already around here.
I'd like the timeline for Melford, please, because I need to plan for my exit out of the city. So could you give me the timeline when the residential component you expect to start breaking ground or expect to have it finished? What are your timelines on the residential?
Well, again, it's a multi-parcel project. For this particular parcel, I can't give you the timeline for all of it. Mike, you want to give a suggestion on
Yes,
our building?
18 months.
approximately
The only thing I can tell you is the time to build is 18 months.
18 months and you can start building. How long does it usually take you?
We're going to start in a year. We just don't know what year we're going to be up. We're going to start as soon as we have all the permits to do so. I can't tell you when that might be, but it's an 18 months build.
Okay.
That's another question. I saw Mr. Antonetti in front of Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. I think it was Monday this week or maybe Friday. I saw you standing on the sidewalk out front of where I work. And you got up here and you said, oh, well, until it gets approved by the city, we can't take it to the county. But yet you are already at my county facility. Why is that?
I'm there a lot. I represent many projects. I'm blessed in that regard. But I mean, if you work at DeFi, you know it's not just there for Melford. It's there for everybody in the county. So there's a lot of different things. I wasn't there for Melford, but I would have said hello to you if I noticed that.
But they've already
Sorry.
started construction in Melford. They already have.
Well, Melford's an ongoing concern. It's got many entitlements approved. So it's not just this. This is just one aspect of it. So it's firing on many cylinders. And so
I was told if the traffic was a big problem, they wouldn't proceed with approval for the other sections of this plan. Is that a lie?
who told you that? I'm not sure.
Henry,
Henri.
Gardner.
Mr. Gardner.
I can't speak for him, but he was present, and we've communicated design of this. We've communicated how the traffic would meet requirements, and that's been a consistent.
So it's a lie. And the problem is they don't know the impact of one of these developments, and there are so many going on simultaneously that have been mentioned here tonight. The Jesuit is going to go through the apartments over at Marketplace and so forth. They don't even know the impact from one of these builds, and they have already approved all these others. And my concern was...
I don't know about those projects, and this was ahead of those, but I don't know what's going to happen with it. We don't represent them, just speaking to Melford specifically.
I think we should invest the $50 million to connect to Route 50 as another entrance and exit to this plan if you really want it to be successful.
Well, the reason why it came off the master plan is because it wasn't warranted. The state has finite resources. They've spent tens of millions of dollars to construct the current interchange with Maryland 3 and 50. There was no market, and there was no justification from a tax perspective for that public infrastructure to be constructed. $50 million for an interchange, which it may be even more than that to build something like that today, is beyond the reach of any single project. So it's not realistic. If we had many ways in and out, I think there probably still would be criticism of the traffic. We're doing the best we can with the rules and regulations that exist. And, we appreciate your comments, but, we hope this
But
will.
see, you think it's not warranted, but it is, because all that traffic is going to funnel over into Bel Air and onto our little side streets. And so it is a problem, and I think if you want us to approve and like this and go shop there and whatever, it should be a good faith effort on the part of the developer to invest that money and have a safe project that will make traffic easier for all the surrounding homes.
Well, in all due respect, we feel we do have a safe project. We have invested money in studies. We've invested money in physical infrastructure over the years. The question is that enough to alleviate the regional traffic network? It's not. I don't want to give any false claims about that. So I think we've been honest and forthright with what we're proposing, how we meet the current regulations, and what we've done in the past to support the traffic we propose. I do appreciate everybody's comments. Frank, I don't know if you want to...
I think we're going to wrap it up right now. We've been at this for about 2 hours and we're kind of hearing the same issues over and over again. We'll be here to answer any of your questions. If you want to stick around, come get a closer look at the plans. Again, the public hearings, BAPB, Advisory Planning Board, Tuesday, January 9th, 7 o'clock in this room. City Council, Tuesday, January 16th, 8 o'clock in this room. We have a sign-in sheet. If you haven't signed in, please do so we can reach out to you if need be. Thank you all for coming tonight, and we'll see you down the road.
Thank you.
It's a done deal. They're saying we're screwed. Good old plan.
Thank you.